Rain tapped softly against the windows of my apartment in downtown Seattle, the kind of drizzle that turned the city into a watercolor painting. My phone lay face down on the table beside the half-empty cup of tea, silent and accusing. I'd checked it 12 times in the past hour, though I already knew the truth. No messages, no calls, nothing from Mom or Dad. It was my 29th birthday, and my parents had forgotten. Again. The screen flickered with notifications from friends, coworkers, even old classmates. I barely remembered all saying happy birthday with cheerful emojis. But from the two people who were supposed to care, most absolute silence. I told myself I was used to it, that I'd long stopped expecting anything. Yet when I caught my reflection in the window, my own eyes betrayed the lie. They looked like someone still waiting. A knock came at the door. I froze, half hoping, half knowing better. When I opened it, Lucas stood there, tall and impossibly composed in a gray suit that fit him like it had been sewn around his bones. "You didn't think I'd forget, did you?" he said, with that easy confidence that always made me feel safe. Behind him, under the streetlight's shimmer, waited a Rolls-Royce silver Ghost, sleek, silent, unmistakable. The headlights cast two white halos across the wet pavement. My neighbor's curtains twitched. "Lucas, what I started," but he handed me an umbrella and smiled. "Come on, birthday girl." The restaurant he'd booked overlooked Lake Union, glass walls glowing gold against the night. Inside, a dozen of my friends shouted surprise as I walked in, confetti bursting midair. There were candles, champagne, a live jazz trio playing my favorite Ella Fitzgerald songs. Lucas kissed the top of my head and whispered, "Told you I wouldn't let today go unnoticed." For a moment it worked. The warmth, the laughter, the music, they filled the hollow space where disappointment had been building all day. Still, my phone stayed close to my plate. Between toasts and photos, I kept glancing at it, the dark screen like a quiet reminder. No missed calls. No, "We're proud of you." Not even the obligatory text that used to arrive hours late. Lucas noticed. He leaned closer. "You okay?" "Just thinking," I said, forcing a smile. He brushed my hand lightly. "Then think about this instead." He nodded toward the window where the rolls shimmered under the restaurant lights. "After dinner, I'm taking you somewhere." When we left, a few curious patrons snapped photos as Lucas opened the car door for me. The moment felt surreal. Me, the girl my parents once called impractical, stepping out of a limited edition Rolls-Royce with the man Forbes had labeled one of America's youngest billionaires. Lucas laughed when the camera flashes went off. "Guess we just made someone's gossip page." I tried to laugh too. But somewhere deep inside, I thought they'll probably see this photo before they remember my birthday. The night ended with cake and dancing in the soft rain. My friends sang off-key, and for once I let myself belong. When the crowd finally thinned and Lucas drove me home, he said, "You know, Emily, not everyone gets family who shows up. But you've built your own." I looked at him, at the man who remembered every small detail about me, my fear of thunderstorms, my love for cinnamon tea, and wondered why the people who'd raised me couldn't do the same. At midnight, he posted a photo of us stepping out of the car, me in a dark blue silk dress, laughing under his umbrella with the caption, "My favorite woman deserves the world." Within an hour, it had thousands of likes. The comments ranged from heart emojis to envy-laced admiration. I stared at the image, unsure whether to feel proud or exposed. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight streamed across the floor, and my phone was vibrating nonstop. Dozens of notifications. At first I thought it was from the post again, until I saw the name flashing across the screen. Mom. My stomach tightened. I let it ring once, twice, then finally answered. "Emily. We saw the picture." "Is that really Lucas Sterling?" Her tone carried a strange mix of excitement and urgency. "Yes, Mom," I said slowly, sitting up. "Good morning to you too. Well, we need to meet him. Tonight, if possible." Her voice sharpened like she was scheduling a business deal. I blinked, still groggy. "You didn't call yesterday." "What? Oh, right. Happy belated sweetheart, we just got so busy. With what Evan had a client dinner, she said quickly. Anyway, this is important. Your father and I think it's time we reconnect. You know, as a family. The words hung between us heavy and absurd. Reconnect. After months of silence, I glanced at the photo still trending online. I'll think about it, I said quietly. Please do, she added, and then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand, the hum of the city outside fading into white noise. It wasn't the call I'd waited for all these years, the one with warmth, remorse, or love. It was opportunity disguised as affection. My parents had seen a Rolls-Royce and suddenly remembered I existed. A faint ache spread across my chest, not sharp like heartbreak, but dull and familiar. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a fresh cup of tea, and opened the curtains. Seattle's skyline gleamed in the distance, silver and new. I thought of the years I'd spent trying to prove myself worthy of their attention. Perfect grades, scholarships, promotions, all while they cheered for my brother's every minor success. Maybe this was their version of happy birthday, a request for access to the world I'd built without them. When Lucas called later that morning, his voice was bright. You're trending again, he said with a laugh. Half the internet's obsessed with your dress. The other half wants to know how I managed to win you over. Did you see my parents' comment, I asked? He paused. They reached out, more like reappeared. Lucas sighed softly. I'm guessing it's not about you, it's about what they think you represent now. Maybe, I said, swirling my tea. But I'm done chasing approval. Then don't, he replied. Let them chase you for once. His words settled in my chest like a slow-burning ember. Maybe it was time. For years I'd been the daughter waiting at the window for headlights that never came. Now I was the woman others craned their necks to see drive by. Power didn't feel like vengeance, it felt like clarity. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, I looked again at the picture of us under the umbrella. My reflection blurred with the image on the screen, two versions of myself colliding, the forgotten girl and the woman the world suddenly noticed. For a fleeting second, I almost felt sorry for my parents. They were about to learn what it meant to be invisible. I placed the phone down gently, the last vibration fading into silence. Outside, the city lights blinked like a constellation only I could read. Maybe this year, I whispered to the empty room, I'll be the one deciding who deserves my attention. The city was waking up beneath a pale gray sky when I arrived at the office, coffee in hand, and mind already elsewhere. My phone sat silent beside the monitor, the same as it had last night after that awkward call. No messages, no follow-up, no hint of apology. Just a thin layer of silence stretched between me and the people who used to be called family. I sipped my drink, pretending to care about the morning reports flashing on my screen, but my mind kept circling back to a kitchen table from long ago, oak wood, polished smooth and always set for 4, though it felt like 3. I was 8, the first time I noticed how invisibility worked. Mom had been bustling around the kitchen, arranging candles and ribbons for Evan's championship dinner. He'd just won the Little League finals, and she was determined to make the evening perfect. The smell of roast chicken filled the house, laughter bounced off the walls, and I stood there clutching a tiny box of cupcakes I'd made with the neighbor's daughter. It was my birthday, too. I waited for someone to remember, for one of them to look my way. Nobody did. When the guests sang for Evan, I whispered my own song under my breath, the candlelight trembling like it was embarrassed for me. Later that night, after everyone left, I ate one of the cupcakes alone at the kitchen counter. The frosting had melted, but I told myself it still tasted sweet. By high school, I'd stopped expecting them to notice anything that wasn't about Evan. He was the prodigy, the one with the debate trophies, the scholarship offers, the charm. I was the quiet one who filled sketchbooks and edited videos on an old laptop. Dad would pat Evan's back and say, "You've got real potential, son." To me, it was always, "You're doing fine, honey." Fine was the word that built my childhood, the fence that kept me in my place. I remember one afternoon standing in front of the living room mantel, watching Dad polish Evan's newest trophy. Beside it sat a photo of Mom and him beaming with pride. My certificate from the state writing competition was tucked away in a drawer under stacks of unpaid bills. When I showed it to them, Mom had smiled absently. "That's nice, sweetheart," she'd said, eyes already on her phone. "I learned early that love in our house wasn't unconditional, it was transactional. You earned it by shining in ways they approved of. For Evan, that was law and leadership. For me, there was no currency that mattered. Still, I tried. Straight A's, scholarships, internships, every step. An offering placed at the feet of two people who never bothered to look down. I thought if I became impressive enough, they'd see me. But recognition never came. Only silence wrapped in polite indifference. On graduation day from college, I scanned the bleachers for them, knowing, even as I looked, that they wouldn't be there. The university courtyard was crowded with families clutching flowers and cameras. My friends waved at their parents' laughter mixing with the sound of the brass band. I stood there in my cap and gown, phone heavy in my palm. A message popped up mid-ceremony. "Mom, flight's too expensive this weekend. We'll celebrate when you're home." I tried to smile, but later, scrolling through social media, I found their photos in Hawaii sunlight. Cocktails matching leis. Family trip, the caption read. That was the night something inside me cracked, not loudly, just enough for the light to start leaking in. I forced myself to stop replaying those memories, focusing on the reflection in my office window. The woman staring back wasn't that forgotten girl anymore. I'd built something from those years of neglect, a business, a name, a life that didn't depend on their approval. And yet every time they reappeared, the ache resurfaced. A soft knock on the door pulled me back. "Morning, boss," Jen said, poking her head in. She carried 2 coffees and a folder of proposals. Her energy was sunshine compared to my gray mood. "You okay?" she asked. "Just didn't sleep much." Too many birthday thoughts. Her tone was gentle but knowing. Something like that. She handed me a coffee. "Well, at least one person in this building is proud of you. Actually, make that 12. We're all here because you decided to stop waiting for someone else's permission." I smiled, grateful. "Thanks, Jen." When she left, I opened my email, half expecting anything from home. There it was, one new message. Subject line: dinner Friday night. Bring Lucas. No greeting, no how are you. Just logistics. I reread it 3 times, trying to feel something. The old version of me would have felt relief, maybe even hope. Now all I felt was a tired amusement. That evening, over takeout, I told Lucas. He listened quietly, fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "So they're inviting you now," he said. After years of silence, he raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, the engagement coverage finally reached them." "Front page clarity," I said, half smiling. "Apparently love is only real when it's attached to a billionaire." Lucas leaned forward. "You don't have to go, I know. You also don't have to prove anything anymore." "I know that too," I said softly, staring at the candle between us. Its flame flickered like it was listening. "But I think I need to hear what they sound like when they pretend to care." He reached across the table, brushing his thumb against my wrist. "Then go. Just remember, you decide what kind of conversation it becomes." Later that night, I sat on my couch scrolling through old photos. Evan at 12 holding his first trophy. Evan at 18 shaking hands with Dad at his graduation. And me, always at the edge of the frame, half visible. The photos were proof of how consistently invisible I'd been. I closed the album and turned off my phone. The next morning, rain streaked down the office windows. Jen dropped by again, bright-eyed as usual. "So the famous family dinner Friday. Do you think they'll be nice?" "Nice isn't their language," I said. She hesitated. "Do you want my opinion always?" She leaned on the desk. "People like that don't change. They just rewrite the story. Be careful, they'll probably turn your kindness into guilt." I nodded. "Thanks for the warning." Jen grinned. "Good, because I've seen your patient face and it's terrifying." When she left, I laughed quietly. The sound surprised me, it felt strange, free. That evening, I drove home through the mist, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement. As I passed the coffee shop near my old apartment, memories surfaced of working double shifts just to pay rent, eating dinner from vending machines, while Evan posted photos from Paris. That version of me, lonely but determined, felt closer than ever. I whispered into the quiet car, "You made it." At home, I opened my wardrobe and began choosing what to wear for Friday's dinner. I wasn't dressing for them, I was dressing for me. The navy silk dress, tailored and simple, my engagement ring gleaming like a reminder of everything they didn't give me. Lucas walked in, tie loosened, watching me with a soft smile. "You look ready for battle, maybe just for closure." He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. "Whatever happens, don't let them define the tone. You've earned the right to speak without apology." I met his gaze, steady. "I'm not going there to fight Lucas. I'm going there to listen and maybe to end the noise for good." Before bed, I stood by the window looking out at Seattle's skyline, glittering through the drizzle. Somewhere below, thousands of families were sitting down to dinner, sharing laughter, stories, warmth, the kind of closeness I used to dream about. But as I looked around the apartment filled with quiet peace, I realized I had already built my own version of that one, made of choice, not obligation. My phone buzzed once more before midnight. Another message from Mom. "Can't wait to see you Friday. Your brother and Hannah will join too. It'll be lovely." I read it twice, noting how every word sounded practiced, weightless. Still, I typed a short reply. "See you then." When I put the phone down, I felt something new settle in my chest. Not dread, not fear, clarity. This dinner wasn't a reunion. It was a reckoning. And for the first time in my life, I wouldn't be the one waiting to be seen. The smell of burnt coffee and printer ink was the backdrop of my life 5 years ago. I worked in a co-working space that never slept, half startup dreams, half caffeine haze. My laptop sat on a second-hand desk, its hinge held together with duct tape. Every time I hit save, I half expected the screen to go dark for good. But that tiny desk, that flickering monitor, was the birthplace of my company. Aurora Digital began there as a whisper of rebellion against being underestimated. I had no investors, no safety net, just a stubborn belief that creativity could be power. The first investor I ever pitched to laughed. A storytelling agency run by one person, he'd said, "Sounds like a hobby, not a business." He gave me a polite smile and walked away before I finished my presentation. I remember standing there afterward, clutching my prototype deck, cheeks burning, heart pounding. It wasn't the rejection that stung. It was how familiar it felt. The same tone my parents used when they said, "You'll grow out of this creative phase." Maybe I should have cried. Instead, I went home and worked until 3 in the morning. I freelanced for small businesses, writing ad copy and editing videos. At night, I recorded voiceovers in my closet because the echo in my apartment was too loud. Sometimes I fell asleep with my headphones still on, dreaming of invoices I couldn't send because the client hadn't paid yet. I ate instant noodles and drank water instead of soda because it felt healthier somehow, a small illusion of control. Still, every morning I woke up and went back to work. I told myself the same thing each day. One day, this will mean something. Mark, an old colleague from a marketing firm, once dropped by the shared workspace. He looked around, smirked, and said, "So this is what you're doing now, playing entrepreneur?" The next week, I saw a post from my parents online, Evan shaking hands with a local senator, Dad smiling proudly beside him. The caption read, "So proud of our son making real impact." I scrolled through the comments, dozens of congratulations, not one mention of me. I stared at the screen until my reflection replaced the image and whispered, "Maybe being invisible isn't so bad. At least no one expects me to fail." But then something shifted. One afternoon, a cafe owner named Rosa hired me to make a short ad. She couldn't afford a big agency and took a chance on me. I spent 3 days filming her, pouring coffee, capturing steam, laughter, and the light that hit the glass jars just right. I edited it on that dying laptop, every cut fueled by caffeine and desperation. When we posted it, the video exploded, thousands of views, customers lining up outside her door. Rosa hugged me with tears in her eyes. "You made people see what I love," she said. That night I cried too quietly at my desk. Not because of success, but because someone finally said it, they saw me. By the end of the year, I had more clients than I could handle. I hired my first employee, Jen, a graphic designer fresh out of college with too much energy and not enough confidence. The first thing I told her was, "We don't work for recognition. We work to make people feel seen." She nodded, eyes wide, like she was hearing a secret. When Aurora Digital landed its first major campaign, I called my parents. Mom answered after 4 rings. "Oh, hi, sweetie. We were just on our way out." "I just wanted to share some news," I said, trying to sound casual. "My company was featured in the Seattle Business Review." "That's nice, honey," she said. "Did you see the article about your brother's firm? He's expanding into Denver." "Isn't that wonderful?" I bit my tongue until it hurt. "Yes, Mom. It's wonderful." Later I hung up and laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that sounds like breaking glass. A few months after that I met Lucas Sterling. He came to one of our product launch events, tall and self-assured, the kind of man who looked like he belonged wherever he stood. I didn't recognize him at first, though everyone else did. He was the founder of Sterling Tech, one of those names you read about in Forbes. He approached me after my speech. "You built this company yourself, from a co-working space that smelled like despair," I said, and he laughed. "What made you start?" I hesitated, then told the truth. No one believed I could. He studied me for a long moment like he was memorizing the answer. "Good reason," he said. 2 weeks later he called. "I'd like to discuss investment possibilities," he said. His voice was calm, confident, the opposite of mine. We met at a rooftop cafe overlooking the city. He arrived early. I arrived nervous. He listened as I explained my vision: media that told human stories, not algorithms. When I finished, I waited for him to point out flaws the way so many others had. Instead, he said, "You built something that speaks. That's rare." I hesitated. "You're not just saying that because you can afford to be generous," he smiled. "No. I'm saying it because I've failed enough to know what real work looks like." When he offered to invest, I almost refused. "I don't want people to think I succeeded because of a man," I said. "Then don't let them think it," he replied. "Negotiate hard." So I did. I drew up terms that protected my control and matched his contribution. He agreed without hesitation. The day I signed the contract, the rain stopped outside, and the sun hit my desk just right, like a quiet nod from the universe. Aurora grew fast after that. We moved into a downtown office, glass walls, soft lighting, shelves lined with awards. My team expanded from 2 to 12. We worked late nights brainstorming over takeout and playlists that made us feel unstoppable. For the first time, success felt like peace instead of panic. Then came the call. Mom again, her tone light, almost rehearsed. "Your brother's law firm is opening a new branch in Denver. We're so proud of him." I smiled into the receiver. "That's great." She hesitated. "And you're still doing those little videos, right?" I stared at the city skyline outside my window. "Yes, Mom," I said evenly. "Those little videos paid for this view." There was silence, the kind that dripped like slow poison. Then she cleared her throat. "Well, keep it up, sweetie. We'll have to visit one day." But they never did. By the end of that year, Aurora Digital was being called the voice of modern branding. Lucas and I worked side by side, his analytical mind complementing my creative chaos. Somewhere between late-night meetings and shared cab rides, our partnership turned into something deeper. He once told me, "You build worlds out of words. That's dangerous and beautiful." I told him he made chaos look like structure. We never needed to say much more than that. The night before our biggest campaign launch, we stayed in the office past midnight. Lucas leaned against the window, looking out at the rain. "You know," he said, "for someone who started out invisible, you've become impossible to ignore." I smiled. "That's the trick. Be so good they can't look away." But even then, part of me wondered what my family would think if they could see me now. Would they be proud? Would they still see only the reflection of my brother in every success I achieved? A few weeks later, Mom sent a short email. "Your brother says you're doing well. We're proud of you." No signature, no warmth. I stared at the message for a long time, trying to figure out why it made my chest ache. Maybe because it was proof that they'd noticed, but only after someone else told them to. Lucas found me reading it. "You okay?" I turned the laptop toward him. He read, then said, "That's not pride, that's inventory." I laughed softly. "You're right." He touched my shoulder. "So what do you want to do next?" I looked out the window. The city lights shimmered below like a promise. "Next," I said, "I stopped trying to prove anything." Lucas smiled. "Good, because you already have." That night as I walked home in the rain, I felt lighter. My heels splashed through puddles, my reflection trailing beside me. For years I'd been running from invisibility, desperate to be seen. But maybe real power wasn't about being noticed at all. Maybe it was about being undeniable. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers that looked like frozen fireworks. Cameras flashed, waiters glided between tables, and the hum of champagne-fueled laughter filled the air. I smoothed the folds of my emerald satin gown, pretending calm, though my heart was pounding somewhere near my throat. Tonight was supposed to be about the launch of our Digital Literacy Foundation, a joint initiative between Aurora Digital and Sterling Tech. Lucas had insisted on holding the event in New York, saying it was time the world saw what we'd built together. I thought he meant professionally. I didn't know he meant everything. I was standing near the stage rehearsing my speech one last time when I caught his gaze from across the room. He looked impossibly composed in a tailored black suit, his tie undone, just enough to soften his usual precision. There was something in his expression and intensity that made my words dissolve. I smiled back, thinking he was just proud. I didn't know he was planning to change my life in the next 5 minutes. When the host called me up, the lights dimmed slightly. "Please welcome Emily Warren, founder of Aurora Digital, the woman whose creativity is transforming modern storytelling." The applause was warm, polite, expectant. I stepped to the microphone, palms damp, heart steadying into rhythm. "I started this company," I began, "with one camera, one laptop, and a lot of rejection. I learned that visibility isn't something people give you, it's something you create." I saw Lucas in the crowd, his eyes never leaving mine. He looked proud, but there was a spark of mischief too. I was mid-sentence when he moved. The crowd stirred, murmuring as he walked up to the stage. My words faltered. "Lucas." He smiled, reached into his pocket and knelt. For a second, the entire world seemed to stop breathing. The diamond caught the light, scattering it into 1,000 tiny stars across the ceiling. I could hear the collective gasp, the click of cameras, the rustle of dresses as people leaned forward. "Emily," he said, his voice steady and clear. "You built your world with courage. Let me be part of it." My throat closed, my vision blurred. I wasn't the kind of woman who cried easily, but in that moment the weight of years of invisibility, loneliness, trying to be enough pressed against my chest. I nodded before I could find my voice. "Yes," I whispered, barely audible. "Yes." The room erupted in applause. People stood clapping, cheering, whistling. Lucas slid the ring onto my finger, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in a crowd. He pulled me close, his hand steady at my back. "You deserve every bit of this," he murmured. After the chaos of congratulations, after the champagne and cameras and endless flashes, we finally found a quiet corner on the balcony, overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline. The air was cool, perfumed with jasmine from the rooftop garden. Lucas handed me a glass of champagne. "I can't believe you did that," I said, laughing shakily. "You didn't like it, I loved it. You just ambushed me. That's how I keep you interested." I leaned on the railing, staring at the lights below. "You realize the internet is going to explode." "It already has," he said, showing me his phone. Notifications were multiplying faster than I could read them. Number: Emily and Lucas. Number: power couple. Number: From vision to vows. The headlines rolled out within hours: self-made CEO engaged to tech billionaire. From startup to spotlight, Emily Warren's modern fairy tale. By morning, I was everywhere. My face on business blogs, gossip columns, even a morning talk show segment about inspirational female founders. Friends messaged, reporters called, brands reached out. It was dizzying. But amid the storm of attention, one silence stood out: my parents. Not a call, not a text, not even a passive-aggressive comment online. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. It was almost impressive, their ability to vanish, even when the whole world was watching. Lucas noticed my quiet. Still no word. I shook my head. They probably don't even know. He hesitated, then said gently, Emily, they know. I looked out the window, trying not to let the hurt show. I don't know which is worse, ignorance or indifference. That night, after the celebrations wound down, I found myself barefoot on the penthouse balcony, hair undone. City glitter spread beneath me like a mirror of stars. The ring on my finger sparkled coldly under the moonlight. Lucas came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. You should be sleeping, he murmured against my hair. I can't. It feels like I'm standing on a cliff. A good cliff, I think so, I said softly. But cliffs are still high. He turned me around, eyes warm. Then I'll catch you if you fall. We kissed, the city spinning far below, and for that one moment I let myself believe in fairy tales. The next morning I woke to find my inbox flooded: requests for interviews, partnership offers, even speaking invitations. The world suddenly wanted a piece of my story. Everyone except the people who had shaped its loneliest chapters. By the third day I gave in and checked my parents' social media. They had posted a dinner photo, Evan and his wife Hannah, smiling at a table covered in wine glasses and candles. The caption read, "Proud family moments." No mention of me. No acknowledgement that their daughter had just been proposed to by one of the country's most influential men. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Later that week, Lucas invited me to meet his mother, Margaret Sterling. I was nervous. Billionaire mothers weren't exactly my comfort zone. But the moment I stepped into her sunlit garden, she smiled and took both my hands. I've heard so much about you, she said warmly. Any woman who builds from nothing has my respect. Her sincerity disarmed me. Over tea and conversation, she asked about my work, my foundation, my childhood. I told her a few things, edited truths about growing up in a family where attention was a scarce currency. She nodded knowingly. Some families build walls instead of homes. When we left, she hugged me tightly. Welcome to ours, dear. The words caught in my throat. I hadn't heard that kind of acceptance in years. Back at the apartment, I sat in silence for a while, thinking about how easily Lucas's mother had embraced me, while my own parents couldn't even pick up the phone. A week later, a journalist from Vanity Fair requested an interview. We'd love to do a feature on your engagement and your work, the email read. A woman balancing business success and personal happiness. During the interview, the journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Daria, asked softly, "How does your family feel about your success?" I hesitated. "They're quiet." She tilted her head. "Proud, though pride can be a kind of silence too," I said carefully. She smiled, sensing the edge beneath my words, but not pushing. "You're remarkably composed, Emily." "Composure is practice," I replied. That night, Lucas noticed I was distant. "What's going on?" I told him about the question. "I keep waiting for them to care, even after I've stopped expecting it." He brushed a strand of hair from my face. "You don't need their applause to validate what you've built." "I know," I whispered. "But I need to stop needing it." He smiled sadly. "That's the hardest kind of growth." Later, he handed me a framed newspaper clipping, the feature article from when Aurora Digital won its first industry award. Beneath it, he'd written in neat ink, "Proof that you've always been enough." I wanted to cry, but I smiled instead. "You're infuriatingly perfect." "And you're terrible at taking compliments," he said, kissing my forehead. When he went to bed, I stayed awake, scrolling through my parents' posts again. New photos. Evan giving a speech, Mom beaming beside him. The caption read, "Proud parents." I set the phone down carefully like it was made of glass. The room was silent, except for the hum of the city outside. I looked at the engagement ring glinting under the lamplight and whispered, "Maybe they'll notice me now." But deep down I already knew the truth. They wouldn't. Not for the love, not for the success, not even for the ring that half the world was talking about. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence before a storm always sounded like this, too calm, too precise, too familiar. And somewhere inside me, I knew that storm was already forming. The sunlight stretched across the kitchen counter as I poured my first cup of coffee, the steam fogging my reflection in the window. My phone buzzed against the marble. One glance at the caller ID stopped my breath. Mom. I hadn't seen that name light up my screen in over a year. I let it ring twice before answering. Emily, her voice burst through the speaker, too cheerful, too polished. "Sweetheart, how are you?" "I'm fine," I said slowly. "Everything okay?" "Oh, everything's wonderful," she replied quickly, her tone practiced. "Your father and I were just talking about you. We've seen all the articles. Your engagement looks so lovely. Lucas seems like such a wonderful man." I leaned against the counter, half smiling to myself. "You've been keeping up." "Of course. We just think it's time we all got together again. You know, a proper family dinner." Friday night. Evan and Hannah will be there too. A quiet hum filled the space between her words. I could almost hear the calculation in it. "Dinner," I repeated. "After all this time, well, you've been so busy, sweetheart," she said smoothly. "And we've been meaning to celebrate your success. It's long overdue." I waited for something else, a trace of warmth, a hint of apology. Nothing came. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Her tone brightened, relieved. "Wonderful. We'll see you Friday." "Dress nice, darling. It's a special evening." Before I could respond, she hung up. I stared at the phone, the weight of her absence pressing harder now that she'd reappeared. The words "dress nice" looped in my head, hollow and transactional. They didn't want reunion. They wanted presentation. Lucas found me still holding the mug when he came into the kitchen. "You look like someone just offered you a bad deal." I gave a short laugh. "My mother called." He raised an eyebrow. "Your mother called. She wants a family dinner. Friday night." Lucas leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Let me guess, they saw the engagement coverage." I shrugged. "Probably saw the ring before they remembered my birthday." He studied me for a moment. "You don't have to go. I know. You don't owe them anything." "I know that too," I said quietly. "But I think I need to see what they really want." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "Just promise me one thing. Whatever happens, you don't let them make you feel small again." I smiled faintly. That's not who I am anymore. Still, after he left for a meeting, I sat at the table, staring at the phone. The silence between us had once been protection. Now it was an open invitation for old ghosts to walk back in. That evening, I met Jen for lunch. She took one look at my expression and said, "Oh no." "Who died?" "No one," I said. "My family's just resurrecting themselves." Her eyes widened. "Your mom called dinner Friday night." "The whole family." Jen frowned. "They don't call for no reason." "I know." She leaned across the table. "Be careful. People like that don't change, they just change tactics." "I'll keep my armor on," I said, forcing a smile. "Good," she said, sipping her iced coffee. "Because you've got the patient smile of someone about to destroy someone politely." The next 2 days passed in a strange blur. Between meetings and interviews, the thought of that dinner lingered like static at the edge of my mind. Every night I told myself I was ready, then woke up the next morning feeling the same dull ache in my chest. By Friday, I stopped pretending it didn't matter. I opened my wardrobe and stood there for a long time before choosing the navy silk dress, elegant, quiet, unflinching. I didn't want to look like success thrown in their faces, but I refused to shrink either. The engagement ring caught the light as I slipped it on, a small, private reminder that I didn't need their approval anymore. Lucas watched me from the doorway, tie loosened, expression unreadable. "You sure you don't want me to come?" I shook my head. "No. This one I handle alone." He stepped closer, his voice low. Then at least remember who you are when you walk in there. I met his gaze. The girl who stopped waiting for permission. Exactly. The drive felt shorter than I remembered. Familiar streets passed in a blur, houses lined with trimmed hedges and expensive silence. When I turned onto my parents' street, my hands tightened on the wheel. The house looked the same as always, impeccably kept, unnervingly still. Even the porch light glowed like a sentinel waiting to judge. I parked in the circular driveway, the quiet hum of the car fading into memory. For a moment I sat there breathing in the past. The last time I'd stood on this porch, I'd told them about my engagement to Lucas. My mother had smiled politely. My father had checked his watch. I'd left that night knowing I was alone in every sense of the word. The front door opened before I could knock. Mom stood there, her smile too bright, her pearls catching the hallway light. "Emily, you look beautiful." "Thanks," I said, stepping inside. The scent of roast beef filled the air. The table gleamed with polished silverware and untouched glasses of wine. Everything felt rehearsed, like a stage set for reconciliation that no one believed in. Dad appeared next, moving slower than I remembered, but still carrying that quiet authority that used to shrink me. "Emily," he said with a nod. "Good to see you." "Dad." He gestured toward the dining room. "Everyone's waiting." Evan and Hannah were already seated. My brother's smile was sharp, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, well, look who's finally home," Evan, I said evenly. Hannah rose to hug me, her perfume thick and sugary. "You look amazing," she said, voice dripping sweetness. "We've been following everything about you and Lucas. You two are so perfect together." "Thank you," I said, sitting down. Dinner began with practiced small talk. Compliments about the engagement, about how busy I must be, about how wonderful it was that I was finally getting recognition. I smiled, nodded, and watched the performance unfold. Every compliment carried weight. Every pause a calculation. "So Mom said at last," her voice a shade too light. "How is Lucas? Still busy with all his investments?" "Yes," I said carefully. "He's doing well." Dad cleared his throat. "We were thinking perhaps he'd be interested in meeting with Evan's firm. There's a potential partnership opportunity." Evan leaned forward, grinning. "We've had some challenges recently, but with the right backer we could scale again." There it was, the real reason. "Challenges?" I asked. "Nothing major," Dad interjected quickly. "Just a temporary setback. Your brother's firm hit a slow quarter. These things happen. But if Lucas could lend his insight or even a short-term investment..." Mom touched my hand, her eyes wide with false sympathy. "We'd all be so grateful, darling. You're doing so well, and family helps family, right?" The words landed like a stone. I set down my fork carefully. "You haven't spoken to me in over a year," I said, "but now you need something." Evan laughed lightly. "Come on, Em. Don't be dramatic. We're just asking for advice." "You're asking for money," I corrected. The air froze. Dad's jaw tightened. "We're still your parents." I looked at him. "Then act like it." Mom's voice cracked, half guilt, half performance. "Think about your nieces, Emily. They shouldn't suffer because of business troubles." The word suffer scraped across my nerves. I pictured the photos of their children in matching uniforms, the private school tuition my parents had paid, the vacations they'd posted online. "Family helps family," Dad repeated, as if that settled it. I looked around the table, their expectant faces, the glossy plates, the illusion of warmth. "That's funny," I said quietly, "because family forgets me every year until they need something." Evan's chair creaked as he leaned forward. "You've always thought you were better than us. Ever since you made some money, you've turned your back on your own blood." I met his eyes, calm. "I didn't turn my back. You closed the door." Silence swallowed the room. I stood, setting my napkin on the table. "If this is what you invited me for, then consider the answer no." Mom's voice trembled. "Emily, please, I hope the meal was worth the act," I said softly, "because the performance ends here." When I stepped out into the night, the air felt sharp and clean, the kind of cold that wakes you up completely. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. How did it go? I typed back. Exactly how we expected. Then I started the car headlights cutting through the darkness ahead. Somewhere behind me, their house glowed like a museum full of memories empty of love. The dining room glowed too brightly, every surface polished to the point of reflection. My mother fussed with the napkins, though they were already perfect, her bracelets jingling with nervous precision. Dad sat at the head of the table, posture stiff, hands folded like a man presiding over a board meeting instead of a family dinner. The air smelled of roast beef and anticipation. Across from me, Evan tapped his spoon against his glass, an old habit that had always annoyed me. Hannah smiled too much, her eyes sharp behind the sweetness. It felt less like a reunion and more like a performance. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," Mom said, refilling my wine glass, even though I hadn't finished the first. "All those articles about your engagement, they were lovely." I smiled faintly. "Thank you." Evan grinned. "And Lucas Sterling, huh? Didn't think you had a thing for tech billionaires." I ignored the jab. "Didn't think I'd find one who liked storytellers." Dad chuckled stiffly, clearly impatient with the small talk. "You've done well for yourself," he said. "You should be proud." "I am," I replied. The politeness in my voice felt heavy, rehearsed. For a while, the conversation danced on meaningless subjects: the weather in Seattle, Hannah's new yoga studio, the twins' piano lessons. But the air under it all vibrated with something else, a hum I recognized too well. Eventually, the silence stretched just long enough for Dad to clear his throat. "Well," he began, "we actually wanted to talk to you about something important." I set down my fork, already knowing. "Of course." He slid a folder across the table toward me. The papers inside were crisp, freshly printed, and smelled faintly of ink and desperation. "It's Evan's firm," he said. "A small setback. Nothing catastrophic, but we could use a little help bridging the gap." "Bridging the gap," I repeated. Mom leaned forward, eyes wide with practiced concern. "You're doing so well, Emily. Maybe Lucas could invest," Dad finished smoothly. "Just to get things moving again." I stared at the folder. "You want me or Lucas to bail him out?" Evan raised his hands. "It's not like that. It's business. We'd pay it back." I let out a quiet breath, setting the folder aside. "And what does business have to do with family dinners?" The table went still. Mom reached for her glass, her tone soft and trembling. "Honey, we're not asking for much. Think about your nieces. They're at Westridge Academy, and tuition's due soon." Hannah smiled sweetly. "They ask about Aunt Emily all the time." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo album. "Here, look." I glanced down. Pictures of birthday parties, school plays, beach vacations, memories I was never part of. "They look happy," I said. "They'd be happier if they saw you more often," she replied, her voice sugary enough to rot teeth. I looked up. "You never invited me." Mom blinked. "Well, you were always busy." Dad shifted in his chair. "We're family, Emily. When one of us succeeds, we help the others. That's what families do." I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. "Is that what we're calling this now?" Family, Evan frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you don't get to ignore me for years and then remember I exist when you need a check." Evan's voice rose. "Oh, come on. You've always had a flair for drama." "I learned it from watching you," Mom gasped. "Emily," I leaned forward, keeping my tone calm. "Where were you when I was trying to start my company, when I couldn't make rent?" "When you said my work was a hobby," Dad waved a dismissive hand. "That's different." "No," I said softly. "It's exactly the same. The only difference is that now you think I'm useful." The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. Hannah tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, her voice trembling in that familiar, calculated way. "We just want to help your brother. He's going through so much stress and the children shouldn't suffer for it." "You mean the children whose school you've been paying for with your retirement fund?" I asked. Dad's eyes narrowed. "You've been talking to people. People talk when they realize hypocrisy makes good gossip," I said. Evan slammed his palm against the table. "You think you're better than us, don't you? Just because you got lucky, Luck doesn't keep you up till 4 a.m. for 10 years, I said, meeting his gaze evenly. Luck didn't build Aurora Digital. Dad's voice turned sharp. You'll regret this attitude, young lady. Family is all you have when the world turns its back. I smiled without humor. The world turned its back long before you did. Mom's tears finally spilled. Please, Emily, we're not perfect, but can't we start over? For once I stood folding my napkin neatly beside my plate. Starting over would require honesty. You're still pretending this is about love. Hannah's lips tightened. What's wrong with wanting to protect the family? Protect. I laughed softly. You're trying to clean up his mess by using my success. That's not protection, that's manipulation. Dad rose halfway from his chair. You think you built this alone? You wouldn't have gotten anywhere without the values we taught you. Values? I asked. Like silence. Like pretending everything's fine while you play favorites. The room fell silent again. The only sound was the slow ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, marking each second like a heartbeat. Finally, I reached for the folder, flipping it open. Figures, loans, interest rates lies written in neat columns. You want me to fix this, I said quietly. But here's the truth. I'm not your savior. I'm your mirror. Evan glared. What's that supposed to mean? It means I built something you can't control and that terrifies you. He laughed, but it was hollow. You've always needed to prove you're better. It's pathetic. No, I said. What's pathetic is thinking you can buy respect with guilt. Mom sobbed softly. You don't mean that. I looked at her, and for the first time I didn't feel anger. Just clarity. I do. But I don't hate you. I just don't need this anymore. I picked up my purse. Enjoy your dinner. Dad's voice hardened. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. I paused at the doorway. That sounds familiar. Then I turned the handle and stepped into the night. The cool air hit my face like freedom. The sky was clear, a rare thing in this part of town, and the stars looked sharp enough to cut. I walked to my car, each step lighter than the last. When I got inside, my hands were trembling, not from fear but release. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A message from Lucas. You okay? I typed back. Yes, they showed me exactly who they are. Then I started the engine, watching their house shrink in the rearview mirror. For the first time, I didn't feel like the daughter they had forgotten. I felt like the woman who had finally remembered herself. The email arrived just after dawn. The subject line read, Unauthorized Account Access Attempt. I blinked at the screen, the words blurring for a moment before they settled into meaning. The message was from my financial advisor, confirming that someone using my father's name had contacted their office claiming family authorization to view one of my investment accounts. My stomach clenched. I read the email twice, then 3 times. There was no mistake. The steam from my coffee curled upward, filling the quiet kitchen. I stared at the phone, waiting for the inevitable. It came 2 minutes later. Dad. I let it ring twice before answering. Emily. His voice was calm, deliberate, the same tone he used when closing a deal. I think there's been a misunderstanding. There hasn't, I said, steady but cold. You tried to access my financial records. We were just concerned, he said quickly. Your mother and I wanted to make sure everything was secure. You've had such rapid growth, sometimes it's easy to miss details. You mean you wanted to know how much I could afford to give, Evan? I replied. A pause, then a sigh. We're still your parents, Emily. You could show a little gratitude. For what? For everything we've done for you. I almost laughed. You mean everything you didn't do? His tone hardened. You've changed. All this money, this success, it's made you arrogant. No, I said softly. It's just made me impossible to control. There was a long silence before he said, We'll discuss this tonight. You're coming over. No, I'm not. He hung up before I finished. I sat there staring at the phone, the old anger rising, but not burning as it once did. It wasn't fury this time, it was focus. When I arrived at the office, Lucas was already there, leaning against my desk with 2 coffees. You didn't sleep, he said, handing one over. Wasn't planning to, I replied, setting down my bag. My father tried to hack my finances. Lucas blinked. He's desperate, I said. They all are. The dinner wasn't enough. They want control. He studied me, concern etched into his face. What are you going to do, face them, I said simply. But not as their daughter, as the woman they taught to survive without them. He reached for my hand, his voice soft. You sure you don't want me there? I shook my head. No. This is mine to finish. By evening, I found myself driving the familiar route again, the neighborhood as pristine and silent as ever. Their house stood at the end of the street, its lights glowing too warmly, too falsely. I parked in front engine, idling for a moment. The last time I'd stood on that porch, I left feeling small. Tonight, I wasn't here to be anyone's child. The door opened before I knocked. My father's face was calm, but his jaw was tight. My mother hovered behind him, wringing her hands. On the table behind them sat neat stacks of papers, binders, and a calculator. Come in, he said. I stepped inside, placing my phone on the table beside the documents, the voice recorder app already running. Evan sat at the far end of the table, dark circles under his eyes, his suit wrinkled, his confidence cracked. Hannah was beside him, expression carefully neutral. We just need to clear the air, Dad said, gesturing for me to sit. This is all a misunderstanding. Let's see, I said, taking the chair across from him. You asked for money, I said no, and then you tried to get it anyway. Seems pretty clear to me. Evan rolled his eyes. You're blowing this out of proportion. Really, I opened my bag and placed a printed copy of the email on the table. Would you like to explain this? Dad's face flushed. That was a mistake. We were just checking something. I met his gaze. You used my advisor's personal number. You claimed family authorization. That's not checking, that's theft. My mother gasped softly. Emily, please don't say things like that. Why not? I said quietly. It's true. Evan leaned forward, voice sharp. You always have to make yourself the victim. You think you're better than us because you have money now. I don't think I'm better, I said evenly. I think I learned the difference between love and leverage. Dad's voice boomed, the authority in it more brittle than before. Watch your tone. No, I said, leaning back. You watch yours. Because I'm done pretending that you have power over me. The air thickened. Even Hannah shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Evan, who looked like he was about to explode. Let's all calm down, Mom, said her voice trembling. We're family. That word, I said softly, has done more damage than any insult you could have thrown at me. Evan slammed his hand on the table. You think you built this all by yourself. You think the world would even look at you if you didn't have our last name. I smiled faintly. My last name didn't open doors. It closed them. People heard Warren and assumed I was just another rich family's kid playing business. I earned every inch of what I have while you were busy burning through Dad's savings. Dad stood. Enough. You're not talking to your brother that way. I rose too, the calm in my voice cutting through his anger. You're right. I'm not talking to my brother. I'm talking to a man who used his own parents' money to cover his mistakes and blamed me when the bill came due. Evan's face reddened. You don't understand what it's like to have a family depending on you. No, I said, I understand what it's like to be the one no one depended on until they needed something. My mother started crying. Please, Emily, don't do this. I looked at her, at the woman who had once been a shadow behind her husband and son. I'm not doing anything. I'm just refusing to play my old role. My father's voice dropped low, almost pleading. We're asking for help? That's not a crime. No, I said, but manipulating people is. And I have the emails, the messages, the proof of what you tried to do. Don't test me. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker in his eyes. Evan pushed back his chair, muttering, You've turned into a real piece of work. I smiled slightly. No, I turned into the kind of person you never thought I could be. I gathered the papers from the table, tucking them neatly into my bag. I'm not signing anything. I'm not financing anything. And if you ever try to touch my accounts again, I'll press charges. Dad opened his mouth, but I cut him off. We're done here, Mom whispered. You can't just leave. I met her gaze. I already did. You just didn't notice. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Evan's chair scrape back violently. You can't just walk away, he shouted. I paused at the threshold and looked over my shoulder. I can, and I am. The night air outside was crisp, almost cleansing. The stars blinked faintly through the haze. I exhaled, feeling something inside me uncoil. In the car, my phone buzzed. A message from Lucas. You, okay? I stared at the screen for a moment before replying, yes. They showed me exactly who they are. Another notification popped up before I could start the engine. Breaking news: Warren and Associates under investigation for financial misconduct. I sat back, the irony settling like quiet thunder. The storm I'd walked away from was already collapsing on its own. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry or wounded. I felt untouchable. The morning sun spilled through the glass walls of my apartment, warm and indifferent, as if the world hadn't shifted overnight. My phone sat on the counter beside an untouched cup of coffee, vibrating every few minutes with notifications I didn't need to read. Warren and Associates under investigation. The headlines were everywhere. My family's empire, the pride they'd worn like armor, was dissolving in real time. I turned the phone face down. There was no satisfaction in it, just a quiet inevitability. Evan had built his success on shortcuts and borrowed time. The collapse wasn't karma, it was math. Lucas walked in from the balcony holding his own coffee. It's all over the news, he said, setting the mug down beside me. I know. Do you want to say something publicly? I shook my head. No. Let them have the stage for once. He studied me as though trying to measure how deeply the damage went. You're too calm. I've been waiting for this storm my whole life, I said quietly. Now that it's here, it just feels predictable. He nodded, understanding. You can't save people from the consequences they chose, I know, I said, but it doesn't make it easier. When he left for work, I opened my inbox. Among the noise: press requests, curious acquaintances, opportunists, one message stood out. It was from Jen. Miss Rivera's memorial confirmed for Friday. You still planning to attend? The name stopped me cold. Miss Rivera, my high school media teacher. The first adult who ever told me I was good at something that wasn't numbers or grades. She died of cancer 3 months ago. I donated to the scholarship fund in her name, but couldn't bring myself to attend the service back then. Maybe now I could. That Friday, I walked into the small auditorium of our old school. The smell of chalk dust and old carpet hit me like a time machine. The stage was lined with photographs of Miss Rivera, surrounded by her students, eyes bright, her laugh frozen in every frame. A woman around my age was speaking at the podium. Miss Rivera never let me give up, she said, voice trembling. She said, talent doesn't need permission, only courage. I still hear her saying that. The words sent a chill down my spine. I remembered that line too. 17 years old, sitting in the back row, showing Miss Rivera a short film I'd made on a borrowed camera. I'd been terrified. She'd laugh. Instead, she'd said, this is what storytelling looks like when it's honest. Don't stop. After the service, I stood in the courtyard where I'd once eaten lunch alone. The breeze carried the faint smell of rain. Around me, former students hugged and shared stories. One young woman, maybe 19, stood apart, clutching a portfolio to her chest. Were you one of her students too? She asked shyly when our eyes met. Yes, I said. She saved me more than once. She did that for everyone, the girl said. I wanted to study film, but, well, I can't afford it now. She gave a small, embarrassed laugh. Guess I'll just figure something else out. Her words sank into me like a seed finding soil. That night back in Seattle, I couldn't sleep. The image of that girl, eager, uncertain, kept replaying. I thought about Miss Rivera, about all the times she'd filled in where my family hadn't. Maybe I couldn't change the past, but I could change the legacy attached to it. Lucas found me at my desk surrounded by legal pads and old notebooks. "You're up late," he said, rubbing his eyes. "I have an idea," I said. "Something that actually matters." He smiled. "Those words usually cost me at least 3 meetings." "I want to start a foundation," I said. "A scholarship for young women in digital media. Name it after Miss Rivera." He froze, then nodded slowly. "That's beautiful. I'll fund it myself," I added. "No donors, no family ties, no strings." "Emily," he said gently, "you know your family will see it as a message." "I know," I said. "That's the point." The next few weeks became a blur of drafting documents, meeting lawyers, designing a purpose. I assembled a small board of women I trusted, founders, artists, mentors. I called it the Rivera Initiative. The mission was simple: to give girls what I never had: belief, access, and opportunity. While the lawyers finalized the structure, the messages from home became more desperate. My mother's voice trembled on the first voicemail. "Emily, this is all spiraling. Your brother needs help. The press is tearing us apart. Please, sweetheart, at least talk to him." The next one came the following day, sharper. "You're cruel," she said. "We're your family. Don't you care how this looks?" By the third, she was crying. "They might take the house. You don't understand how hard this is for us." I didn't reply. Each message was a ghost tugging at the edges of my resolve. One morning, I sat in my office watching the sun rise over the city. My lawyer slid the final document across the desk. "Once you sign, the trust becomes irrevocable. No one, not even you, can pull the funds." I stared at the pen for a long time. Lucas, sitting beside me, touched my hand. "Once you do this, there's no going back." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm doing it." I signed. When the ink dried, I felt lighter than I had in years. The next week, we announced it publicly. The press release read: Aurora Digital founder Emily Warren establishes $16 million trust for women in digital media arts, honoring her late mentor, Miss Rivera. The story spread fast. People called it inspiring, visionary, generous. But underneath the praise came the whispers: revenge disguised as philanthropy. I didn't care. On social media, the comments were mixed. Some applauded. Others said I was flaunting my wealth while my family suffered. The only response I posted was a quote from Miss Rivera: "You can't build legacy on guilt, only on purpose." That afternoon, Jen burst into my office, breathless. "It's working. We've already received 200 applications for the first round." 200, I said, stunned. She nodded, eyes shining. "It's changing lives already, Emily. You did that." I looked out the window, the city lights flickering like new stars. For the first time, success didn't feel like armor. It felt like meaning. That evening, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Evan's voice came through, bitter and brittle. "You've gone too far." I closed my eyes. "No, Evan, I finally went far enough." He hung up, and I stared at the dark screen for a long time before whispering goodbye. The night was quiet except for the hum of the city. Somewhere below, life kept moving. People laughing, cars, passing, rain starting to fall again. I turned off the lights, letting the glow from the skyline fill the room. On my desk lay a single sheet of paper, the foundation's motto printed in bold letters: empower, educate, elevate. They wanted my money. Instead, I gave them my absence and gave the world something better. I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating endlessly on the nightstand. The morning light was soft, filtered through gray clouds, but the notifications flashing across the screen burned like warning lights. Dozens of missed calls, hundreds of mentions. I swiped one open, and there it was, the headline, splashed across every feed: Warren family betrayal, daughter refuses to help her parents amid financial ruin. The words were venom disguised as sympathy. The photo beneath it was worse, an image of me at the Rivera Foundation Gala last week, smiling beside Lucas holding a microphone. The caption twisted my charity into cruelty. While her family struggles, Emily Warren celebrates luxury and power. I sat up slowly, heart pounding. I didn't need to read the article to know who planted it. The phrasing, the emotional manipulation, it had Evan written all over it. The kettle whistled faintly from the kitchen, but I didn't move. Lucas appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work, his expression dark. "You've seen it," he said. "Of course I've seen it. They're saying you cut your family off when they needed you most." I laughed softly, the kind of sound that doesn't carry warmth. The same people who didn't show up for my wedding, the ones who never sent a text for years. He sat beside me on the edge of the bed. "It's trending, Em. Half the comments are calling you heartless, and the other half defending you, saying this is classic manipulation. You've got supporters." I nodded, forcing myself to breathe. Let them talk. I'm not explaining myself to people who were never there when I was invisible. But the truth was, my pulse wouldn't slow. I could feel the weight of every camera, every whisper clawing at my composure. I knew how the public worked. They didn't care about nuance. They cared about drama. At the office, the energy was tense. Jen was waiting at my desk, tablet in hand. The PR team's in panic mode, she said. "Do you want to issue a statement?" "No," I said. "That's exactly what they want." Jen frowned. "You can't just ignore this. It's everywhere. Even Business Daily picked it up." "Let them." I glanced out the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Truth doesn't need to scream. She studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, then we'll stay quiet for now." I walked into my office, closed the door, and sank into the chair. The silence felt heavier than usual, pressing in like fog. I opened the article again, forcing myself to read every line. Sources close to the Warren family say Emily Warren has repeatedly refused to assist her parents despite her vast wealth and her fiancé's resources. A family friend claims they gave her everything. Now she won't even answer their calls. I almost smiled at the phrase, family friend. My parents had always been good at recruiting sympathizers. The knock came softly. Lucas stepped in, closing the door behind him. "You can't just let them rewrite the story." "I'm not letting them. I'm documenting them." His brow furrowed, meaning I gestured toward the folder on my desk. Every message, every voicemail, every attempt to guilt me, it's all there. If they want to play public, I'll remind the world what private looked like. He hesitated, then said, "You've always had a better sense for timing than vengeance. So what's your move?" I looked up, the decision already formed in my mind. They wanted attention. I'll give them truth. 2 days later, I called a press conference. My team looked terrified when I announced it. Jen pulled me aside. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm not defending myself," I said. "I'm defining myself." The conference room was packed, journalists, cameras, microphones, like a sea of metal eyes. As the lights dimmed, a hush fell. I stepped to the podium, notes untouched. "My family taught me the value of silence," I began, voice steady. "When I was a child, I learned that love in our house came with conditions. I learned that achievements only mattered when they reflected someone else's pride. And I learned what it felt like to be unseen." Flashes erupted across the room. "I didn't create distance out of cruelty," I continued. "I created it out of survival. When I built my company, when I built my foundation, I wasn't running from my family. I was building something they didn't believe in. Something based on purpose, not performance." Someone called out, "Do you regret cutting them off?" I looked directly at the reporter. "You can't cut off what never connected." The silence that followed was absolute. Then I smiled slightly. The Rivera Foundation was named after the first person who ever saw me for who I was, a teacher, not a relative. I dedicate my work to people like her, not to those who only see worth in what they can take. When I stepped off the stage, Lucas was waiting near the curtain. His eyes were shining. "That was perfect," he whispered. The story flipped within hours. Headlines changed from accusation to admiration. "Composed and courageous, Emily Warren breaks her silence." Donations to the Rivera Foundation doubled overnight. Messages poured in from women across the country, founders, artists, even mothers, sharing their own stories of being unseen. But not everyone was celebrating. Back at the old family home, my father threw the newspaper across the room. My mother sobbed into her hands. Evan stormed out, shouting about betrayal. I didn't have to be there to imagine it. I'd lived that chaos once before. By evening, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. I let it ring out. The voicemail came through seconds later. "You've humiliated us. You've made us look like monsters. Are you happy now?" I deleted it without listening to the rest. That night, I sat by the window watching the city lights reflect on the glass. Jen texted, "You won. They're finished." I typed back, I didn't want to win. I just wanted peace. But even peace felt strange. Empty, like the silence after thunder. The next morning, the fallout began. Evan's law firm lost 2 major clients. The ethics board launched a formal inquiry. My parents' savings were frozen pending investigation. The same relatives who once praised them started calling me brave in comment sections. The hypocrisy was predictable, almost poetic. Lucas handed me a newspaper over breakfast. The headline read, "Warren Family Collapse, Daughter's Integrity Shines Through." He smiled faintly. "You didn't just survive their story, Emily. You rewrote it." I folded the paper carefully. "I just told the truth." He reached for my hand. And that's why it worked. Later that afternoon, I stood in the Foundation's studio where the first group of scholarship finalists were being interviewed. Laughter echoed off the glass walls. These young women didn't know me as the estranged daughter of a scandal. They knew me as the woman who believed in their voices. One of them, a soft-spoken girl with curly hair, said as I passed, "Thank you for giving us a chance." I smiled. "You gave yourselves the chance." I just opened the door. As the day wound down, Jen peeked in, tablet in hand. "You should see this," she said. "Evan's firm just shut down. It's official." I nodded, not surprised. He built his empire on borrowed ethics. It was only a matter of time. When the building emptied that evening, I stayed behind. The office lights dimmed to gold, the city glowing beyond the windows. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was defending my life. I was living it. The phone buzzed one last time before I left a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over, Emily." I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Outside, the night air was cool and alive. I looked up at the skyline, the stars barely visible above the light pollution. My reflection shimmered faintly in the glass of the building across the street. For once, it didn't look like someone who needed to be seen. "They exposed me to destroy me," I murmured. But all they did was reveal who they really were. The sky outside my apartment window was a flat sheet of silver when I opened my laptop. Every major news outlet had the same headline plastered across its homepage: "Warren and Associates under federal investigation." Underneath was a photo of Evan leaving the courthouse, his expression tight, flanked by reporters shouting questions he refused to answer. I stared at the image, the irony biting. For years, I'd been the one in the shadows while my family basked in public light. Now, it was the opposite. Lucas came up behind me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "It's happening," he said quietly. I nodded, scrolling. "Client embezzlement, fraud, misuse of funds, it's all there. Your name's not mentioned anywhere." "Of course not," I said. "They know better than to drag me into their mess. Not after the last round." He kissed the top of my head. "You don't look happy." "I'm not sure I am," I admitted. "This isn't victory, it's gravity." He poured coffee into a mug and handed it to me. "Still, it's justice." "Maybe," I said. "But justice doesn't always feel clean." By noon, the coverage intensified. Former clients were stepping forward. Employees spoke of irregularities. Evan's photo appeared everywhere, on screens in cafes, in lobbies, even flashing across the billboard outside my office. The same people who once praised him were now tearing him apart. At Aurora Digital, Jen walked in wide-eyed. "You've seen it right. It's chaos out there." "Yes," I said. "They're saying he used clients' retainers to pay off personal loans." and that your parents' retirement fund was part of it. I set down the mug. So it's true. She hesitated. You don't seem surprised. I'm not. I've known for a while how deep they were sinking. I just didn't know when they'd hit bottom. Do you want to release a statement? She asked. No, I said. Let the silence speak. That evening, I sat in my office long after everyone left, watching the lights flicker across the city. My phone buzzed an unknown number. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it. Then I answered, Emily. My mother's voice trembled. It's bad. They might arrest him. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry to hear that. Please, she said. You could help. You know people. Lucas knows people. Maybe you could. I can't fix what he did, Mom. He's your brother. Yes, I said softly. And I'm your daughter. But that never stopped you from forgetting me. Her voice broke. We made mistakes, but we're still family. Family doesn't mean what you think it does, I said. Before she could answer, I ended the call. The next morning, the story deepened. Warren and Associates client files seized by investigators. Luxury assets frozen. Insiders claim family funds misused. It was everywhere. I went for a walk, hoping movement would ease the storm inside me. The streets were wet from an early drizzle. At a newsstand, the newspaper headlines shouted my brother's downfall to anyone who cared to read. I paid for one and folded it neatly under my arm. At home, Lucas watched me set it on the table. You okay? I don't know, I said. I thought I'd feel relief. But all I feel is tired. He nodded. You've been waiting for an apology. You won't get it. I don't want an apology anymore, I said. I just want peace. Later that day, my mother showed up unannounced. She looked smaller, her perfect posture replaced by fragility. Emily, she said softly, can we talk? I hesitated before letting her in. She sat at the kitchen table, fingers trembling around a glass of water. They're taking the house, she whispered. We have nowhere to go. You have friends, I said. They've all disappeared, she murmured. It's funny how people vanish when money does. There was silence between us, heavy, full of ghosts. Finally, she said, You've done so well for yourself. We're proud of you. The words landed flat. Tears filled her eyes. I wish things had been different. So do I said quietly. But wishing doesn't change what's real. Can't you help us? She asked, voice breaking. Just this once I met her gaze. You mean like the way you helped me when I was alone? Her lip trembled. You don't have to be cruel. I'm not, I said. I'm being honest. When she left, she didn't look back. The door closed with a final tired click. That night, I sat in the living room, the newspaper spread across my lap. A photo of Evan in handcuffs stared back at me. My father stood beside him, looking decades older. It should have been vindication. Instead, it felt like an obituary for what little innocence remained in our bloodline. Lucas joined me on the couch, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. You did everything right, Emily. You built your life honestly. That's all that matters. Then why does it feel like losing? Because part of you still hoped they'd change. I didn't answer. A few days later, an invitation arrived for a business ethics panel. The organizer wrote, We'd be honored to have you speak about integrity and leadership. I almost declined, but something in me knew I needed to go. The conference was held in a downtown ballroom, bright lights. Sleek cameras rose of attentive faces. When the moderator asked about family and morality in business, I took a breath before answering. Integrity, I said, isn't about perfection. It's about choice. It's choosing truth even when loyalty tries to silence you. Someone in the audience asked, Do you ever regret cutting ties with people who hurt you? I smiled faintly. You don't cut ties. You stop letting them tie you down. The applause that followed felt like closure. When I returned home that evening, Lucas had dinner waiting, simple pasta, 2 glasses of wine. To surviving the chaos, he said, raising his glass. To finally ending it, I replied. Halfway through dinner, my phone rang. The screen showed a number I hadn't seen in years. I hesitated before answering. M. Evans' voice was raw, cracked. It's me. I froze. What do you want? I don't know where else to go, he said. They froze everything. Hannah's gone. Mom won't talk to me. His voice broke. I don't know what to do. For a moment, the old instinct flickered to fix, to soothe, to carry. But then I remembered the years of silence, the manipulations, the way they'd looked at me like a resource, not a person. You'll figure it out, I said quietly. Emily, please, he whispered. You're all I have left. I closed my eyes. No, Evan, you're just realizing what that feels like. I ended the call and set the phone down. My hands shook, but my heart was steady. Lucas reached across the table, touching my fingers gently. You okay? I nodded. I finally am. Outside rain began to fall soft and steady against the windows. I stared into the darkness, the city lights glinting like reflections on water. They'd spent their lives trying to make me small, to convince me that love had to be earned. But tonight, as the storm rumbled in the distance, I felt the quiet certainty of freedom. For the first time, I wasn't surviving them. I was living without them. The city was quiet when the phone rang again. It was almost midnight, the rain still whispering against the windows when I saw his name flash across the screen. Evan. For a long moment, I just stared at it, letting the sound fill the apartment. Lucas stirred beside me, half asleep. You don't have to answer, he murmured. I know, I said, but I picked it up anyway. Emily Evans' voice was rough, frayed around the edges. Please don't hang up. I need to see you. I didn't respond. Everything's gone, he continued, breath ragged. The firm, the house. Hannah left with the kids. I've got nothing. I don't even know where to start. The silence stretched. I could hear him swallow on the other end, could almost picture him disheveled, defeated, a man stripped of every illusion of power. Why call me now? I asked finally. Because you're the only one who ever had sense, he said, his voice breaking. I know I don't deserve it, but can we talk? Please, I closed my eyes, the old ache tugging at my chest. Tomorrow, I said. One time, when I hung up, Lucas reached for my hand. You don't owe him this. I know, I said softly. But I need to see what's left of the wreckage. The next morning I drove to my parents' house, or what used to be theirs. The lawn was overgrown, the once perfect shutters peeling the driveway empty, except for Evan's beat-up sedan. The sight of it made my throat tighten, not out of pity, but disbelief. They'd built their entire lives around appearances, and now the mask had cracked. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and quiet. My mother sat at the dining table, thinner than I remembered, her eyes hollow. My father stood behind her older shoulders, slumped under invisible weight. And Evan, he looked like a ghost, wearing his old arrogance like a torn coat. Emily, Mom, whispered, her voice catching. You came. Yes, I said. Dad gestured to the chair across from them. Sit, please. I didn't move. You said you wanted to talk. He nodded, clearing his throat. Things have changed. We were hoping that I'd fix it, I finished. Evan's hands clenched on the table. You don't have to be cruel. I'm not being cruel, I said quietly. I'm being honest. Mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Your brother made mistakes, yes, but the press exaggerated everything. We just need a little help to get back on our feet. The desperation in her voice was sharp enough to cut. I wondered if she even believed what she was saying. A little help, I repeated. You're asking me to clean up the very mess you created while pretending I didn't exist. Dad's tone sharpened. We were doing what was best for this family. No, I said. You were doing what made you look successful. There's a difference, he glared at me. You always twist things to make yourself the victim. I met his gaze steadily. When you're invisible long enough, it doesn't take much to feel like a ghost. Evan's voice cracked. You think I wanted any of this? I worked hard, Emily. I carried everything. You carried the spotlight, I said. And when it turned off, you blamed the dark on everyone else. He pushed back his chair, standing abruptly. You're impossible to talk to. Then stop talking, I said. The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother began to cry again, soft and rehearsed. I reached into my bag and placed a sealed envelope on the table. There's a check in there, I said. It's enough to keep the house for now. But it's the last thing you'll ever get from me. Mom looked at it as if it were a lifeline. Oh, Emily, I cut her off. Don't thank me. It's not forgiveness. It's closure. Dad frowned. We didn't ask for pity. I know, I said. You asked for control. Again. I turned to leave. Evan followed me to the porch. You're really walking away, I faced him. I already did. You're just seeing it now. His eyes glistened raw with disbelief. I don't know who I am without this family. Then maybe it's time you find out, I said softly. When I drove away, the house shrank in my rearview mirror, an aging monument to everything that had rotted beneath the surface. A week later, I sat in Patricia's office, the familiar scent of jasmine tea grounding me. She leaned forward, pen poised over her notebook. So how did it feel seeing them again, like watching a play I used to act in? I said. Same lines, same ending. And how did you leave it? I gave them money to survive, but not a place in my life, I said. That feels balanced. Patricia smiled faintly. That's not revenge, Emily. That's healing. I guess so, I said. For years I thought forgiveness meant reconciliation. Now I realize it just means release. Outside her office, the world felt lighter, like someone had lifted a weight off my ribs. Back at the Rivera Foundation, the first group of scholarship recipients was arriving for their orientation. I stood by the glass door watching them file in, young women with cameras slung around their necks, notebooks full of dreams. Their laughter echoed down the hall, bright and untarnished. One of them, a girl with short curls and oversized glasses, paused when she saw me. Miss Warren, she asked shyly. I just wanted to say thank you. I wouldn't be here if not for this program. I smiled. You earned it. We just gave you the start. As she walked away, I felt something shift inside me. The satisfaction wasn't sharp like victory. It was gentle, steady like breathing after holding it for too long. That night, Lucas and I had dinner on the balcony. The sky was deep violet, the city pulsing softly below. He raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said. To quiet endings, I replied. He smiled. You know, you don't talk about them much anymore. I don't need to, I said. They used to be the story. Now they're just a footnote. After he went inside, I stayed a while, letting the night breeze brush against my skin. The lights from the foundation's building shimmered in the distance, a beacon I'd built from pain, now glowing with purpose. My phone buzzed once more, a new message from my mother. I opened it without fear. We hope you're happy. We're trying to get by. Maybe one day you'll forgive us. I typed a single reply, I already have. But forgiveness isn't a door you walk back through. I deleted the thread and set the phone face down. Later, as I watched the moon drift above the skyline, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at them, not at the past. The absence of anger wasn't emptiness, it was peace. They had taken years from me, but they had also unknowingly given me something stronger, the resolve to live differently. To build love that wasn't conditional. To create a family not of blood but of belief. For the first time in my life, I understood that closure isn't a single moment, it's a series of choices that add up to freedom. When I finally went inside, Lucas was waiting, smiling. You look lighter, he said. I am, I said. Because I finally let them go. The morning light filtered softly through the floor to ceiling windows of the Rivera Foundation, painting the office in quiet gold. A year had passed since the night I last saw my family. 1 year since I decided that peace would be my final answer. The world had changed, or maybe it was just me. The foundation now occupied 2 floors downtown, its walls covered with photographs of scholarship recipients, faces full of hope, ambition, and the kind of joy that used to feel foreign to me. I walked through the main hall, pausing to admire a mural. One of our students had painted a tree with roots made of film reels and branches that reached into galaxies of color. Beneath it, she'd written in small letters to Miss Rivera, who taught us to dream. Jen approached, tablet in hand, her smile as bright as ever. They're all here for orientation, she said. 50 new students this year. 50, I repeated. She nodded. You did that. I smiled. We did that. The sound of laughter filled the room as the young women gathered their energy crackling through the air. I caught bits of conversation about editing, lighting, and deadlines, the kind of nervous excitement that reminded me of the girl I used to be sitting in the back of Miss Rivera's classroom, desperate for someone to notice she had something to say. Later, over lunch in the rooftop cafe, Jen leaned across the table teasing. Remember when this foundation was just an idea scribbled on your kitchen table? I laughed. I remember thinking no one would care enough to help. And now I don't think about who cares, I said, glancing at the city below. I just care anyway. The simplicity of it grounded me. The old hunger for recognition was gone. I didn't need applause, validation, or approval. I just needed to know that what I built mattered to someone other than myself. That afternoon, Jen knocked on my office door again, her tone cautious. You might want to see this. She handed me her tablet. The headline read, Warren Family Home Listed for Sale. Beneath it, a photo of the once grand colonial house, now dull and weathered. I stared at it for a moment, waiting for the ache that never came. I hope they find peace, I said, finally handing it back. Jen studied me. You're really okay with it? Yes, I said. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It just means I stopped waiting for something that was never coming. That evening, the Foundation's theater buzzed with excitement. The first Rivera Foundation film showcase was about to begin. Rows of students, donors, and guests filled the seats. The lights dimmed as I stepped onto the stage, applause echoing through the hall. Good evening, I began. When we started this foundation, I thought it would be about helping others be seen. But over time, I realized it's about seeing ourselves, clearly seeing what we can build when we stop asking for permission to exist. The faces in the audience glowed under the soft light. I continued. This program was created in honor of someone who saw potential before anyone else did. Tonight we celebrate not just her memory, but her lesson that courage and kindness are not opposites. They're partners. Applause rippled through the room, and for a brief second I felt something like a heartbeat pass between us, a connection deeper than words. After the event, when the theater had emptied, I lingered alone in the dim light. The applause had faded, but the peace stayed. I closed my eyes, imagining Miss Rivera's voice the way she used to speak, with that mix of warmth and conviction. You did it, Emily. You turned pain into purpose. When I opened my eyes, Lucas was standing at the edge of the aisle. How does it feel? He asked. I smiled. Like finally being home. He took my hand. You built your home out of light. The next morning, I found a letter on my desk, handwritten in looping, uncertain penmanship. It was from one of the new scholarship recipients. Dear Miss Warren, thank you for believing in me when no one else did. I promise I'll make something worth watching one day. Maybe I'll even make you proud. I read it twice, then slipped it into a frame beside a photo of Miss Rivera and our first foundation class. It didn't replace the family photos I'd never had. It became something better, proof that love can start from scratch and still grow strong. That weekend I drove to the Oregon coast, where the air tasted of salt and new beginnings. The same stretch of beach where a year ago I had thrown away my old house key. The sky was soft pink at sunrise, the tide washing gently against the sand. I walked barefoot along the waterline, camera in hand, and lifted it toward the horizon. The ocean shimmered like liquid glass, endless and forgiving. For years I said softly, framing the shot, I thought healing meant being seen by the ones who hurt me. Now I know it means seeing yourself clearly and choosing to stay. The click of the shutter was crisp, final. I uploaded the photo later to the Foundation's social media with the caption, "Family isn't who shares your past, it's who builds your future beside you." By evening, the post was already filled with comments from women around the world, sharing their own stories about choosing peace-breaking cycles, starting over. I read each one, slowly feeling the quiet power of collective survival. When I looked up from the screen, Lucas was standing in the doorway. Still reading, he asked. They're telling their stories, I said. That's all I ever wanted, for them to feel seen. he smiled. You did that. No, I said softly. We did that. Miss Rivera did that. They're doing it now. We stood there for a moment, the evening light settling around us like calm water. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore, or justice, or even closure. Those were chapters that had already ended. What remained was the quiet, steady rhythm of a life that finally felt whole. I turned off my phone, the comments still rolling in, and looked at the horizon outside the window, the world still spinning, still waiting for its next story. Maybe you've been overlooked too. Maybe you've spent years trying to earn love from people who couldn't give it. I used to believe that was the only kind of family there was. Now I know better. You can build your own family from kindness, from courage, from people who see you, truly see you. And maybe your story isn't finished yet. Maybe this is where it begins. If this story reminded you of something in your own life, I'd love to hear it. Tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if you believe that peace can be the most powerful kind of revenge, stay with us. There are more stories waiting about healing courage and the quiet strength that comes after the storm. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't fire, it's freedom and peace.